I was born and bred in Nottingham. I think I was born in the Queen's Medical Centre, 1973. So yeah, all my formative years were spent in Notts, and I know very well a lot of the areas that's spoken about in the play as well, which I sort of grew up in a very similar area to the writer. Right, I mean, having a decent knowledge of the play now, I mean, I didn't see it at the time growing up at that era, the sort of late 80s, early 90s, as bleak as it's perhaps pictured in some respects through the play. But I did experience a lot of bleak aspects of Nottingham and small pockets of humanity in certain areas of Notts, and you know, a lot of old, I want to say the word worn out, senses of attachment to a time gone by. I remember getting a sense of from going to certain, you know, backstreet boozers and whatnot. And then sort of growing up through my late teens and early 20s, seeing the city centre start to really change and modernise, and sort of bus routes changing, the way that cars can go into the centre, and trying to get city centre traffic out of the centre of Notts, and changing the city square, and modernising a lot of the old boozers, and taking away certain elements of the history and the past of Notts, changing the face of it. So I saw a lot of change, particularly in the city centre, and then obviously all the cameras coming in as well, and those cameras starting in the city and then moving out to the suburbs. And Carlton now, where I was born and brought up, there's cameras all over Carlton Hill now, and the sort of modernisation of Carlton Hill is now complete, and it's totally changed, and there's more paved areas, and a lot of change. So what was the original question? I think he's bigoted in some respects, opinionated in some respects. I don't think he's a well-educated man, but I think he's an intelligent man. He has a sense of ownership over his city of Nottingham. Talks about welcome to my city of Nottingham, describes how he sees a lot of the suburbs of Notts, and he sort of categorises them with what he thinks happens in those areas, and he seems to have a leaning towards Nottingham being not cosmopolitan, but rather a multi-ethnic, and he sort of leans towards and tips his hat to the ethnicity of certain areas of Notts, whilst also being quite scornful of perhaps the areas that he's come from. He sort of talks specifically about Clifton and Aspley as, you know, being white trash areas, and it's as if he wants to distance himself from those sort of people at that time that were wearing sovereigns and shell suits. But he's probably grown up in those very areas that he sort of despises the mentality of some of the people there. One thing I can really say so far, I mean, we're only on day 3 of rehearsals at this point, but everything I've seen of the other cast, and the cast are all great. It's a brilliant group of people that have been brought together for this play, and just seeing, like, I came into, I'd finished my rehearsals yesterday, and I saw the two lads, Dimesh and Jared, who were playing Danny and Michael, just doing this rap. And it was just brilliant. The two characters have swapped the mixtapes in the show. They just met each other by chance, and they got to know each other through their love of music. And it was just great to see things taking shape at this very, very early stage, and seeing how it's imagining how it's going to be on stage in front of an audience. I think an audience are going to love it, and they're going to love that trip back to that era, which is just it's distant enough now for people to look back with nostalgia about. And there's a lot of music in the play that particularly hip-hop music from that era, and it's just going to be great to revisit all that stuff and everything that I'm revisiting and seeing as it starts to be rehearsed and polished, as it's going to carry on being. It's just been really interesting to behold and to watch.